In this video, we're going to talk about how you can make your workflow much faster and more efficient in AL. We're going to talk about two different tools. We're going to talk about spec-driven development, more specifically OpenSpec, and then we're going to talk about what kind of AI driver you can use, and we're going to talk about OpenCode. Now, the first thing let's talk about is the OpenSpec. Now, OpenSpec is a framework that, as in the name it says, it's open source, so anyone can use it. The idea behind it is that instead of using a lot of time on just vibe coding, you're going to get a much structured way of working. So if we look at it, while you normally, when you would vibe code, you would just like give it a prompt and then keep on prompting and copying the errors back. Using spec-driven development, you're going to start off by actually defining the specs. So all your specs are going to be MD files. And these MD files are going to be created through this framework, OpenSpec. So what you do is you are going to prompt, ask for some kind of spec, and it's going to take you through a workflow where you have a proposal, you're going to have a design, you're going to have a tasks, and you're going to have the specifications. And all of these are just going to be MD files. So while you're doing this, you're not going to be writing any code. You're only going to be writing these MD files and going forward, talking about how these specs are defined. And if something is wrong, you can already here say, okay, I understand what you're saying, but maybe change the spec or change this definition because that's not how I want this to work. For those of you who saw the video with AI without a filter, you saw I used a plan. I had a big MD file that had my whole plan of what I wanted to do. This is kind of the same thing, only it's smaller and it's more controlled because it's already inside a framework. How it's done is that all these MD files are not created at the same time. You're going to create one of them, and then when you agree on that one, it's going to unlock the next one. And once that is done, you're going to unlock the next one, and so on. And this is going to go like, a repeat. You're going to keep on repeating until you are satisfied with these specs. Once everything is done, you're going to tell your AI driver, in our case it's going to be OpenCode, but it can be any other tool also, to start actually applying these changes. And that's where you're going to start writing code. Up until this time, it's only going to be MD files. So that's a little bit about spec-driven development. I'm going to show you how this works in more practical, and it's really one of those tools that you have to start using it to actually get the feel of it and also get the benefit of how everything works together. So the second thing that we're going to talk about was OpenCode. Now OpenCode is actually just an open source CLI. At the moment we have the big ones like we have Google, right? We have Codex. And then, of course, we have the biggest one, which most people are using, which is OpenCode. Now, all these tools are great, and OpenSpec will work in these tools. So if you have a subscription on a max plan of any of these tools, just use that. But there is an alternative. And that alternative is OpenCode. Now, the great thing about OpenCode is, of course, it's open source. And you can use any model you want inside this tool. So like you saw previously, maybe I was using OpenRouter, which meant I can use any of the AI models that I wanted. So at some point, I might want to use ChatGPT for one thing, and I might want to use Opus for something else, and so on. That's the flexibility you get with one of those tools. Also, if your company, for example, gives you a GitHub subscription, which a lot of companies do, right? They give you a GitHub Copilot license. They're not going to give you a max plan for Claude Code or one of the other tools. You can actually also set that up inside your OpenCode and use that inside OpenCode as your CLI driver. So just keep in mind, OpenCode is just a CLI tool like any of the other ones, but it's open source. It's pretty great. And you can use any of the AI drivers you want inside it. Anyway, let's just look at how we can set all of this up. So the first thing you're going to need to get any of these tools running is Node.js. So go to Node.js and download it. So let's download. I'm on Windows, so I'm going to download the Windows installer. Node.js is installed. We're going to need one of the other tools. So let's start off with OpenCode. So if you go to opencode.ai, you have some different options. So you have the CLI version here. How to install, you always copy this. You go to a command prompt of some kind. So let's just start a command prompt here. And paste this in. And it's actually done. So if you wanted to, you can run it here in the terminal. And those of you who have already seen or know something about Claude Code, you will say this looks pretty much the same as Claude Code, right? In here, we can then connect our providers. So you write connect, and you can see what you can connect yourself to. I will just connect mine to OpenAI, and I will use the plus. And I can see I have access to my OpenAI models. So my driver will be this. Now again, I could say I wanted to connect something else. So let's say I wanted to connect my GitHub Copilot. And as you can see, now I have connected my GitHub Copilot also. So I have all the models that I have in GitHub Copilot. Great. Now this is one way of running OpenCode. The other way is to use the Windows client. So if we go back to OpenCode, and we go to download now, and we take the Windows version. Now I like to have both of them installed, just so I can switch between. Sometimes I like the Windows client, sometimes I like the CLI version. So you just go through the installation, and you have your Windows client ready here for OpenCode. How this one works is you press up here, and then you press what folder you actually want this to run in. So I have a demo AL project here. It's just a an AL Go project. Let me just select that as my folder. And now all my prompts will be running in here. As you can see, it also has the same models that I got from my other one, because the providers go across. So if you set it up one place, it's going to work both of them. So let's just set this to be model my ChatGPT 5.4. So this is a little bit more of what we are used to. We have our files over here, and if I create a repository, I will see my changes and so on. So let's just create repository here, and it's set up. Now, if we close this tool down, we need to set up our OpenSpec. So if we go to openspec.dev, we have a command here that we can run. So let's copy that. Again, go into our command prompt, paste it in, and it is installed. Perfect. Now how we actually start using OpenSpec is that you go to your project that you want to run OpenSpec in. So here is my demo, right? I again go to a CMD, and then I can write OpenSpec init. And here it's going to tell you, okay, what drivers are you going to be using? So you can see there's a long list here. So if you're using Codex or if you're using Claude Code, you just choose that, of course. I am using OpenCode, so I will choose OpenCode here. And I will press tab to confirm. hopefully. And it should be set up. So if we go back to our demo folder here, you can see we have gotten now an OpenSpec folder. This is where our things are going to end up when we start using specs, so there's nothing in it right now. And then it also created our .opencode. And here, of course, if you had Claude, it would make a .opencode and so on. And what it has done is, in here, we have got some new skills, which has everything to do with using OpenSpec as our spec-driven development, and also our slash commands. So actually now it's all set up and running. Now, since we're also talking about using OpenCode here, I just want to share something. See if I can get rid of that. I have a GitHub here, which will help get your OpenCode up and running for what the tools that are most used for AL development. So what you're going to get here is you're going to get the AL language server, you're going to get a Microsoft Learn, and you're going to get a compiler and a reviewer. Now it's important to note that the AL language is of course the one written over here by Torben. So all credit is to him. I'm just actually calling his tool. So if you want to know more about this, head over to his GitHub. I'm going to link it in the description of the video so you can go over here and show your love. He has also created an easy way to install this directly inside OpenCode. And of course, all I'm doing is also calling that URL. So nothing of this is mine, just to make sure you understand this is all Torben's work. Anyway, if I now go up to the top here and I want to take this command, and let me open my OpenCode. And we are inside my project here. And let me just paste this in and see if it can figure out to install it. And it's done. So for those and it's done. And the cool thing is, right, when you're running CLI tools, it did end up having some problems, but it just fixed them. So everything should be up and running. As you can see, it says it's created some new skills, some new commands, and it has implemented Microsoft Learn as our MCP server. So also the LSP wrapper from Torben. So let's try to restart our OpenCode here and see if they work. Let's try to do a slash command, and let's try to compile. And it has compiled successfully. So everything should be working. Okay, so let's try to look a little bit on our OpenSpec. And let's see what we have of OpenSpec. We have an OpenSpec propose. And let's say create an action on the customer list that hyperlinks to HTTP hyperlinks to google.com. And as you can see, it has now created the proposal, design, task, and specs. And over here, you can see what files it has actually made. So if you want to see what it has wanted to do, right? These are the design decisions it wants to make. So of course you should read these. And the why. So pretty much read all these MD files and see if you agree on what it says. And if you do, it says, okay, then you can run OSPX apply to actually start coding. So let's do that. Of course, normally you should read these. As you can see over here, it has compiled because there has come a new app in our changes. It's compiled successfully. And then of course now it talks about if you want to push it and stuff like that. So to look, what has it done? So it has removed an open page, so the standard hello world. And then it has created a new action called Open Google with a hyperlink. So pretty straightforward, but it's done what we wanted it to. Now the funny thing is now, right, if we look at our open specs, we have now gotten our changes over here. And in here are all the MD files actually explaining what this change is for. And if you're happy with what has been done and so on, and you think this is correct, you do an OSPX archive. Once you archive a spec, you're actually saying, okay, this spec is no longer open. You have finished it. Let's archive this. And the cool thing about spec-driven development and OpenSpec in this case is that this also makes your AI more intelligent going forward. Because if you looked at it before, it actually looks if there are any specs that has anything to do with this change, and if so, it actually uses that as context to understand your solution. So it's a great way for your AI to get some kind of understanding of your solution without having to read all the code all the time. But actually using the specs, it can understand what your solution is and what your goal is. This also means in the beginning, you might have to be very specific in what kind of changes you want to make. But the more specs you have and the longer you get inside your project, you can actually start making very small prompts, and the AI will understand the context of your project, and therefore it will know what you want to do, because it will understand, okay, this project has something to do with X and Y, so I understand that when he says this, okay, he wants this to happen, and then it will understand the context much better. So over here you will now see that we have an archive where we have the spec actually archived. Great. Anyway, that was actually the short demo I was going to make. In a later video, I'll take you through a whole workflow of creating a whole extension using OpenCode and OpenSpec, but this was just to get people started because, as I said before, it's kind of one of those tools you just have to start using to actually see the benefits. Because right now, when you look at it, you might think that's a lot of overhead just to create small changes. And in the beginning it is, but since you're doing everything much more structured, you're going to get a better result. Also, once your code starts getting more complex, you're still going to have this as your stable backbone to build upon all the time. And for any of you who are using OpenCode or starting to use OpenCode, Remember, the cool thing about these kind of tools is that if you're needing a skill, for example, here it says, do you want me to publish it or something? You can just ask it, can you create a skill for that? And then it will create a skill, and then next time it'll know how to do these kind of things. And if you get any cool skills or any cool other improvement that you think is very good for AI development in OpenCode, please don't hesitate to make a pull request to the Git repository that I also will link in the description, where I have this setup of the OpenCode, so we can make OpenCode a really good driver for AL development. Anyway, that was it for this video. Hope you learned something new, and as always, like and subscribe, and see you in the next one.